Hello my friends, welcome back for some more Oxygen Not Included tutorials. Today let's talk about which duplicants to select, how to manage them throughout the game, how to get them the best skills, how to level them up, kind of get the most out of your duplicants throughout a run. And we're just going to start off with a screen that I'm sure everybody has seen, which is when you first start a new colony, you will be given a choice of 3 different duplicants. Let me tell you the best way to navigate through this screen as far as I've been able to tell. These first 3 are the only ones you can really specialize in a certain job and kind of be a little bit picky about taking. So what you'll want to do, or at least what I want to do, is I'll have one of them specialize as a builder, I'll have one of them specialize as a miner, and I'll have one of them specialize as a researcher. And I do these 3 things because these 3 dupes are going to need to hit the ground running and do their job really well. And those 3 jobs are the things that really need to be done in the early game to kind of put you on a good path to transition into a good, healthy mid-game and take on more dupes that can be specialized in the other jobs that you need to do that they're not necessarily getting done very effectively. So what I would also recommend with these is you can reroll this as many times as you want, but you'll notice that when I reroll, I can get anywhere between 1 and 3 interests, and this will determine what kind of extra skill that they start with, or I guess attributes. It's hard for me to kind of keep those 2 things separated because I think those are often used interchangeably, but the interests are here and the attributes are here. If you were to get somebody that specialized in only 1 interest or only had 1 interest, that would mean that the extra attributes they get are dramatically larger than somebody that has 3, for example. So I kind of like to roll these guys to get specialized heavily in the job that I want them to do. So I will often reroll until I have something that looks about like this, where I have 1 interest for each of them and they are heavily specialized in what they do. I would also mention that I'm not going to cover traits too much here because I did just have a video that I put out talking about what are the best and worst traits. That will be updated when the DLC traits start to stabilize and when we get closer to release. But at least for the base game right now, those are still pretty accurate to how I think about them. There was a lot of great feedback on that video, by the way, and enough that I think that if you check out the video, check out some of the comments, I think if you have no idea which traits to pick, that'll give you a great idea of which ones you should be looking out for. But I'm not going to worry about them too much in this one, only because we have some other stuff that we need to worry about and pay attention to. So, I would ideally get a setup that looks something like this on the interest level. Also, the stress reaction and overjoyed response are not super important, I'd say. I don't really pay attention to that very much, because ideally you will not be hitting the stress reactions at all. And the overjoyed responses are all kind of come and go. I may have some kind of like a half-joking video on what are the best and worst of these things, only because they're not very common that you see them or really notice them, but yeah. What I'll also do before leaving this screen is I will label these duplicants, and you don't have to do this, but I like to do this just because it gives me an idea of what each of these duplicants' main job is supposed to be. So for example, I'll go into their name and I will say, oh, Travaldo? Yeah, okay, you're a builder, so I'm going to label you like this. Devin, you are a miner, so I'm going to label you like this. And Lyra, you are a researcher, so I'm going to label you like this. Some people like to use hats to label their duplicants as well, and you can totally do that. There's nothing wrong with that. The reason I do this is twofold. One, I was doing this before hats even existed, so it's kind of been a habit of mine. But 2, they also show up in pretty much every UI like this as well. Even ones where you can't see their face or their hat, so that can be useful also. So this is what I typically like to do when I have traits that I like, which again we're not going to pay too much attention to, and when they're all specialized in what their job is supposed to be and when they're labeled, I'll just go ahead and start. So I'll just go ahead and hit embark, we'll jump straight into it, and I'm just going to show you guys what I would typically do to start a run, and how I would manage these guys' skills and morale and stuff like that, and when I would think about getting more dupes, that kind of stuff. So let's just go ahead and start off with one of the more vital things that I would say as soon as you start. Open up this priorities tab. You'll be able to see which roles these guys are, and you'll also be able to assign them a priority so that they can focus on what their job is supposed to be. So for example, my builder, I want them to focus on building. My miner, I want them to focus on digging, and my researcher, I want them to focus on researching. This is so that when I get all these things set up, they will be the first person to jump to it, and they will do it way more effectively than anybody else that does not have a lot of specialty in those skills. So what I will often do is set it up like that. I'll start digging in any direction, so let's start digging like this way. I'll set up a handful of tasks for each of them to do in the meantime, and then when they get there, they will be kind of powering through it pretty quickly. And it's hard to tell with them all stacked up like this, but you should be able to see one bar completing a lot faster than the other ones, and that's because you can see the difference between the person that's specialized in those jobs and the person that's not. It's a little bit hard to see, but they perform much, much better. Once I get a little bit further in like this, one of my first objectives is going to be to build outhouses, because you need a place for your dupes to do their business. And this is something that I have not actually advised very much, and this is mostly because of my own failures. I should have been advising this a long time ago, because this is a really good thing to do, and that is to find a section on the map that you're going to keep as like a nature preserve. This matters because this, beyond getting the essentials down, you really want to start figuring out how you're going to sustain your dupes' morale, and that's just going to help them perform better and also get them further in the skill trees without stressing them out. So I would advise looking for a section that has some plants in it, maybe something like this, and try to find a way to preserve that, or at least use it, until you have the ability to make your own manual tiles, which there's a whole bunch of your own natural tiles, that is, which there's a whole bunch of ways to do, but especially on this starter asteroid, this can be kind of difficult to then get the plants planted in the place that you want them to. So I would definitely recommend starting to build up to somewhere where you can preserve one of these areas. Maybe preserve something like this where I don't dig up any of these plants, and kind of create a room out of it, which I'll do as soon as I have the materials for it. So we'll keep these guys going for a little while, and I still do need to solve my outhouses, but the reason I went on this tangent about this room is because building your bathrooms at a place where they have to cross one of these rooms is a good idea to help keep their morale up and kind of plan out how the rest of your base is going to be structured. So I will have this builder. You'll notice that the builder is being attracted to these jobs instead of the mining jobs, and they're getting pretty far in there. Eventually we'll need to build out our research stuff, so let's start building that. That will also require power and a battery, which we don't have enough metal for, which is why you definitely want to dig and go find metal so you can use this stuff. So our builder is going to be busy. Our researcher is just going to be doing kind of whatever in the meantime, since they're not specialized to do anything right now. At least there's no available errands for them to do right now for researching. Once we got that, there we go. We'll wire them all up. And the builder should start working on that as well. And then eventually, once we get our preserve set up, we can start setting up our outhouses, which you'll definitely want to have by the end of the day. If you don't get to your reserve by then, you can always just do something like this, where you drop a few outhouses for the time being and then go back and get them a little bit later. You can also prioritize stuff that needs to be done ahead of something else. And a little bit of nuance from this priority screen. Making them increase this by 1 effectively raises the overall priority. So if I go into this screen, this is like the global priority that everybody will be considering. But if somebody is specialized in one of these building tasks, for example, that will like artificially inflate the priority just for them. And you can see this if you open up their to-do list. What's considered high, what's considered normal, any of that stuff. So all of this guy's stuff will be considered high because he's a builder. But for mining, these are considered standard. If I was to do something else, they would consider that at a higher priority. So yeah, just kind of wanted to explain some of that a little bit. So we've got our bathrooms up on day 1, which is definitely where you want to be. Our research is coming up. When the research is done, you will get access to this panel, which, hurry up, researcher. You can see how painfully slow these guys are sometimes if they don't have a specialty in that. And now that the research is up, the first thing that I want to research is I want to research my food, because that's one of the bigger things you need to solve. Food and oxygen is always how you're going to sustain yourself. And that'll get me into my farming stuff, which will necessitate probably another dupe when I start getting that up, because if I have open building tasks and open mining tasks and open research tasks, nobody's going to be focused on farming. So I do need to pay attention to that when the time comes. And by the way, if anybody ever gets idle, like your miner often will because they can work so fast, I just give them a big line of stuff to do so that they focus on that instead of other things. So we still have them all specialized. The researcher is plugging away on the research. The miner is digging out stuff. The builder should be attracted to building stuff. And if you ever get stuck like this, let's go ahead and prioritize this a little bit higher so that we can open up more of the pathways. So, once we get to this point, we're getting close to where we want to start sectioning off at least where our nature preserve is going to be, which you need at least 4 plants that are naturally planted. And especially on this Terra asteroid without any pips or something like that, it can be really hard to try to rebuild this. So I try to preserve this if you can, only because it's going to matter for morale later in the game. So we're getting close. I'm going to dig out these ones because they don't matter as much, and then I'm going to start setting up my bathroom area, which is just going to look something like this. You can obviously rebuild this and restructure this. I'm not trying to be the most efficient in terms of building here. This is just to get us through this examples as quickly as possible, while also kind of keeping them in context of a real run. So, day's about to end. They're going to use the bathroom. They're going to go do this. Notice how they're going to just sleep on the ground right now because they don't have anywhere to sleep. So we need to solve those 2 problems also. We definitely need to pay attention to each duplicant's morale. And it's going to be given from a bunch of different sources, but this is part of the reason why we're trying to reserve this. But we also want to give them bathrooms. We want to give them bedrooms. We want to give them a great hall. We want to give them a whole bunch of stuff that will help them grow and succeed as quickly as possible. So I'm going to start sectioning off another place, which is just going to be a great hall. And again, I'm doing this very sloppily, so don't worry too much about the implementation details. And I'm just going to play through this, by the way, at a pretty super speed. This is waking up these other 2 guys. Definitely another good reason to have beds. But yeah, let me go ahead and get some of this other stuff done. Actually, I'm going to cancel this because I'm just going to dig through this whole area. So this room on the right, I think, is going to be my Great Hall, and this room on the left is going to be my bedroom area. And those are 2 things that you can set up pretty cheaply and pretty easily, so definitely no reason not to do that. So you can see how quickly they're going to build. We're eventually going to move our bathrooms up here, but we do need the research to actually get the park signs, which will continue, and you'll see how fast these researchers can kind of fly through some of these things that need to get done. So ideally, I will play this all at a reasonable speed. Sometimes I will probably super speed it so that we don't have to wait so long, and this might be one of those times. Let's go ahead and super speed it. Yeah! By the way, this is a debug tool that you can use. I'm not sure if that actually impacts anything from a real run, but it basically simulates as fast as your computer can handle it. So at least for videos, it's very helpful for me because I can just speed run through some of these parts. But yeah, we're getting back up to a reasonable speed. Alright, so on the right here, we would definitely need to start setting up our stuff for a Great Hall. That involves 3 components, and all of which we don't really have right now. We're going to need a couple pieces of furniture. We're going to need a mess tables. We're going to need a planter box either a planter box or a flower pot for our decor item. But yeah, she's getting pretty close here, and once she finishes that up, we should be good to go. There we go. So, on research, we now have the ability to plant food, which is definitely going to be the next reason you might want to consider grabbing a dupe here, is just to have them specialize in farming. So, I'm just going to throw tiles wherever for right now, because it's not super important. And then we need to keep going on the research here. So the things that we need, especially for the Great Hall first, is we need this employment research, and then we will need this decor research, which is right down here. After that, you can start looking for the stuff to get a park sign, which I'm probably just going to fast forward through really fast and kind of cheat and get to it really quickly because we're getting a little bit long in the tooth on the morale stuff that I'm trying to talk about here. So let's start setting up. Let's start actually just doing some of that right now. I'm just going to open up all my cheating tools. Let's start researching some of the stuff that we absolutely need. Actually, it looks like just opening that up gave us what we needed. So let's say we've advanced to the point where we've researched all the things that we need to research, at least in the early game here. So what you'd want to do is start setting up some stuff to have a place for them to eat and sleep. So I'm going to set up this as a flower pot. I'm going to grab one of these water coolers, which you can disable, by the way, so they don't bring water to it. And I'm going to plant a seed in here that's going to be a plant that's going to increase the decor. And you'll want to dig up at least one of these, but probably not from your nature reserve. So you want to look around for a flower. I don't think I can really find one. So oh, there's one right here. So we'll just grab that really fast. And I'll dig this up. There we go. Then you can just set a briar seed to be in here. And the next time that they eat in here, they will actually get a huge morale bonus, which is just going to be important so that they can get their skills, which we'll talk about here in just a bit. We haven't hit the point in which we would get skills or get more duplicants. So we'll just finish up setting up our rooms and kind of worry about that for the time being. So cots, I'm going to do something like this. I have a loud sleeper, so I want to separate them into their own rooms, so I do something like this for that guy. There we go. Now that we're going to be getting morale bonuses from a couple of sources, this is where skills and all that other stuff is going to start mattering. By the way, I'm going to start planting my food, which you definitely want to do as soon as you get these farm tiles up. And this is going to necessitate two things, and I'm glad we're pretty close to this, because I'm going to consider taking a fourth dupe right now. And that is to focus on farming, because I don't have anybody focused on farming right now. Our research just finished, by the way, which we're not going to pay too much attention to anymore, because we did cheat to get a whole bunch of this stuff already. So I'm just going to continue kind of speed running this and getting up to a point where we can select our next duplicant. So you want to kind of think about what jobs do I have and what jobs are not covered by a specialty dupe right now. And that is farming or potentially operating to keep power up. But one of those two things definitely needs to be done. So let's go ahead and choose another duplicant. And ideally I'd want to grab somebody, again, farming. These traits could push me off of this. I'm not going to worry about that too much. Also, if they're not hyper specialized in one of these things, that's probably okay for some of these later duplicants. Because they'll be more versatile later in the game. So let's say we grab this guy. I'm just going to label him as a farmer. Sorry, it's force of habit to randomize their name, because I like the random names that we get. Captain Jude, I mean, you can't argue with that, right? So let's print him, and let's make sure to go into our priorities and set him to be a farmer. We could also specialize him in ranching too, because it's kind of a split role, so I'll specialize him in ranching also. But that'll make sure that he stays on top of keeping our plants growing. He's constantly supplying it with new stuff. That'll make sure that this is at least covered. And then potentially he could help out with this, or he could help out with building, all that kind of fun stuff. Let me move our bathrooms up here, by the way. Bathrooms are another thing you could potentially get a little bit of morale from. You could make this into something where they also wash their hands, which would make it into a room that's a bathroom. And by the way, I haven't showed this overlay yet, which I probably should have. This is how you can tell what rooms are being identified as. And now that we're going through a couple cycles, we can actually see the morale bonuses that some of these guys should be getting. Maybe they will when they eat next. Here we go. So now that they run into this room, you can see that they're getting a big bonus from this great hall. When they go to sleep, they're going to get a bonus from the barracks that they're sleeping in. And if you wanted to, you could make this into a full bathroom. I typically don't, only because this forces you to worry about setting up water filtration and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit early for this phase of the game. It's cycle 3. I don't want to have to worry about that stuff quite yet. Oh, I need to actually assign this correctly. Alright, you're in there, and you guys should trade beds. Alright, get over there so you stop bothering people. There we go. But yeah, you can get something like this. Let's also place down our nature reserve so you guys can see the kind of morale that you would get from this. And then I think this will sustain you up until you probably have about 10 duplicants. And I like to have a good mark for how many duplicants to take by a certain phase of the game. So by this point, I'll also notice, by the way, we are starting to get skill points available, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Up until maybe you have renewable water and renewable food, and I mean food that, like, you are not spending a non-renewable resource to make. For example, dirt is not a renewable resource, and that's what these take. Once you are fully renewable on those two systems, I would not take more than 10 duplicants. And I kind of do have a foggy idea of what these duplicants should be specialized in, so I'll just go ahead and display those. This is an estimate. There's also some stuff down at the bottom where I say you don't need any of these things, and that is also mostly my opinion. You can change that if you want to. As for the artists, I don't think that's necessary yet. Doctors, I don't think that's necessary at all because of how nerfed the germ system has gotten over time. And suit wearing, we're not going to be making suits for a little while anyway, so you should have those other things set up before you need to worry about that to begin with. So when I talk about these jobs, it's both going to be a combination of the priorities that you set for each of these guys, but it will also be the skills. So eventually, when you're digging around the map, you could start getting... Whoops, I need to turn this back off. You could eventually start getting tiles in which you can't dig because your duplicants don't have the specialty to be able to do that. Or maybe you'll get it for research when you start planting some of the research stations that are more advanced because you don't have the skills to do that either. You'll get a notice here of like, oh, your duplicates don't actually have that skill. So let's talk about this menu for a little while, because this menu is going to be something that you're going to be checking back to kind of regularly. So on each of your duplicates, you can assign them skills, And the first most obvious thing is that if you have them named to do something, you should probably get the skills that make them better at that thing. So for builders, for example, you'd want to progress up this skill track here. And by the way, I'm able to do this without any skill points, only because I have all my cheater stuff on. And you'll also notice that the people that you typically pick for these things are going to have hearts there, and that's going to actually increase their morale by a little bit. And you want to kind of keep an eye on their morale and make sure you don't exceed it, because if you exceed it, that will start to stress them out. They will have stress reactions. They will work much less effectively if that's going on. So you kind of want to keep them under the stress, or rather the morale that they're currently generating. But that was the whole idea behind having a great hall, behind having this nature reserve, behind having bedrooms. And there's other stuff that I'll talk about here in just a bit that can increase that. But at least for the first little while, specialize them exclusively in the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. The other thing that I have not been great about telling people about, because I probably have not appreciated this very much, is there is a skill that is specifically to help them learn their attributes faster. So I would say if you get to a point where you're not really sure what to spend it on and you have morale to burn and they're specialized in their job, start grabbing some of these research skills. And it sounds funny, but that actually increases their science ability, which dramatically increases how fast they learn their attributes. So that later in the game, you have these like supercharged, like really smart dupes that are really good at their jobs, potentially really good at a lot of other things too. Like they could be faster at moving or better at carrying stuff. So yeah, up until you need to start transitioning into the later parts of the game, I would definitely recommend specializing them in the jobs that they're going for and in these research skills so that they learn their attributes faster. So, let's say we get to a point where we're starting to bump up against the morale threshold. It's already happening for a couple of them, but they haven't also experienced all the nature reserve, great hall, all the combination of stuff. This should last you for quite a while. But let's say we get to the point where we have our 10 duplicants, which I'll just spawn them here really quickly. Let's go ahead and make this into a sandbox mode so I can actually spawn these guys. So I'll just spawn these. We won't pay too much attention to their jobs right now, but we'll talk about how to manage skills as the game goes on. Clear all these alerts also. Let's go ahead and spawn some duplicants. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's say we're at about this phase of the game. Whoa, it spawned another researcher Lyra. That was pretty weird. And another miner. Huh, I'm exposing some of their random dupe generation. Alright, so let's say we're at about this point. Let's say we need more morale because we're starting to bump up against the ceilings that are set on us. There's a couple other things you can actually do to help out with this. And I'll talk about them in order of what I think is the most practical versus kind of the least practical. So the most practical ones, and the easiest one to get right away, is just to give them longer breaks during the day. So if you do something like this, you can actually see their downtime morale change, which means that you can literally see how much morale they're gaining by just giving them extra time off throughout the day. Of course, they're going to be less effective if you do this, but this will also allow you to do more specialized things. So that means that the time that they're working, they'll be performing a little bit better than they otherwise would, assuming that you're assigning out their skills to reflect that. The other thing to think about is if you take a look at this consumables tab, this will tell you the food quality and the morale that you get from each of these types of food. I've talked about this in other videos, but the types of foods that you're really going to want to shoot for because they are the most practical are this meal lice. You can see that it's a -1 morale on that. You could potentially on some of these like Terra maps and other ones that spawn with this temperate biome, get into these bristleberries, which are a little bit better. You can cook those to turn them into gristleberries, which are a little bit better than that. But the ultimate final boss of like practical food is barbecue. And that is going to look like this. +8 morale, which is a huge morale jump from the other ones that you would normally be doing. If you really want to get silly, you could try getting into some of these other ones, and you can see the morale needs that are, or rather the morale increases that are given here. I would also really warn you that growing this food is a lot of tax, and having barbecue, having great halls, having plumb bathrooms, having bedrooms, that should give you all of your dupes enough morale to specialize into all of the practical skills that they will need throughout the game. So let's just spawn a bunch of barbecue here so that we get these duplicants up to a reasonable point. I'm going to set up some more bedrooms so that everybody is at about the same area. I'm being really sloppy with this, by the way, you guys. This is not meant to advise you on how to effectively build out a base. I'm just kind of doing this for the sake of speed. Let's expand our Great Hall here. I'm going to skip the bathrooms for right now, but plumb bathrooms will help a little bit if you wanted to use this lavatory and all that stuff. I usually will not do this until my water loop is fully sustainable, only because that's the time when I will need to clean water anyway. That's also kind of a personal preference that a lot of people don't agree with, so don't treat that as like the final truth. But I mean, you can be successful with that, so and it makes it easier to me, so that's what I would recommend. So for the sake of it, let's just pretend these are plumb bathrooms for the time being, and we'll see what kind of morale needs we have. Wow, that was really sloppy. Almost deleted a duplicate too. Alright, and then let me spawn also some barbecue so that they have some good food to eat. There we go. This is a Texan's dream. Alright. So everybody's coming in here, starting to eat. By the way, you can open these doors. You will still get the room bonus from these if you have these doors open. Some other things while we're waiting for them to get their morale up so we can see the final skill trees. If you want to add a couple of other things, like recreational buildings, like this arcade cabinet, for example, or the jukebot is actually really good. It takes a lot of power, but it can also entertain a whole bunch of duplicants at the same time. You could get extra morale boosts from stuff like that. You could build them their own individual bedrooms with these comfy beds and a bunch of decor. And speaking of decor, you could start dropping decor around the map that will help increase their morale. But eventually, with all these things combined, let's see where we're at right now. Some of these people are where we expect them to be. They're at about 30. And they could get a little bit higher or a little bit lower than this, depending on what else they have. But this is about where you'll want to stabilize. And this will allow us to both specialize these people in very specialized things, but also give them skills to be super well-rounded with this much morale. So let's say, for example, we take one of these guys. Who was this? Frankie? Let's rename Frankie. Let's say that Frankie is our pilot, for example. This is a very specialized role. They're going to be flying rockets. So let's start to dig into the skills that he will need as a pilot. So you're obviously going to need the research skills, and you will need the suit-wearing skills before you can get into any of this rocket navigation stuff. It's already eating up about 21, and most of their stuff should be focused on either helping out the colony when there's downtime or flying rocket missions. So you kind of want to decide, all right, what's the next most practical things for the rest of these duplicants to have? For things like cooking, and I'm just going to run through this really fast on the ones that you don't need to worry that much about. For things like cooking, you probably really only need one cook for this type of colony size. And by the way, I would recommend you eventually get up to about 15 dupes before you're ready to finish the game. That one cook will still handle all of the barbecue and stuff that your colony will need. So you don't need to have a bunch of people specializing in this. You probably don't need to have a bunch of people specializing in these decorating skills. However, things like ranching could get more important as you're on entirely barbecue by the end of the game, because that's a fully sustainable food type that's going to give a great morale bonus. You could give them some of these mechatronic engineering so that they can help construct shipping stuff. You could give them these extra skills for strength so that when they carry stuff around, they have more stuff to carry. You could give them extra skills into this construction so that if you need help on a construction project, everybody is really good at it. Some things that you don't really need to worry that much about, especially by the later parts of the game, are these digging skills, because most of the map will be dug out, or you will have one or two of them that are really specialized in that. The farming also, if you're on entirely barbecue, you don't need anybody to be on farming anymore. And also doctoring. I've talked about this before, but you shouldn't really get into the habit of having a lot of hurt or sick duplicants if you're taking care of your germs pretty well, which I'll cover in a tutorial here, probably tomorrow, actually, if I can get enough time to do it. But yeah, so that's what I would say as far as figuring out how to specialize these guys. Let's just pretend that we specialize some of these other ones too. So let's say a builder, maybe earlier in the game, we wanted them to have digging so that they could help out with some of these digging tasks. Builders might also want to carry a bunch of their own supplies, and they may be building in places where we need suits. So for pretty much anybody else, I would say you want to specialize them in this suit wearing, potentially in ranching, potentially in building, but you can kind of see what kind of value you would get out of each of these by just examining what kind of capabilities you get. And because this guy's a builder, I probably want to have him also specialize in this mechatronics so he can construct my conveyor rails for me and all the other shipping materials. So a builder by the end of the game would probably look something about like this. if you didn't want to have them have these digging skills anymore, or if they're a builder, they don't necessarily need this researching skill anymore. I'm going to heavily recommend this, and I'm going to heavily recommend building out some of these skill scrubbers, which are here, stations, as I'm struggling to find it because my pattern recognition is failing me. Okay, here we go. You want to have some of these skill scrubbers, which, by the way, I'm just going to drop a cheater power source for this. These skill scrubbers are great because, and I don't know why I used to think this way. I used to think that scrubbing skills was kind of like a mark of failure, but it's really not. It means that you're being smart about your assignments at the time of the game that you need them. So on this builder, for example, once the map gets mined out, and once they are really good at their job, I don't need any of this digging or this researching stuff anymore. So for the builder in particular, I might send him up here and be like, alright, you need to forget your skills. Let's get him off of there. Let's shake you up like a mixed drink or something like that. Let me go ahead and super speed this so we can get him off. And then by the time he's done with this station, you can then respec them to be more efficient at the job later in the game. So these skill scrubbers are something that you can also use for a couple of other purposes, but I would generally say, like, these are good to have. And I don't see enough people talking about this because I don't see enough people kind of thinking about how their dupes are going to mold from one phase of the game to the next. This can also be very useful for if you overskill your dupes and they don't have enough morale for what you need them to do and they're starting to get stressed out. You can use that to scrub their skills and reassign with less morale needs. That's also a very practical way to do this. So let's say we're in the later part of the game. We don't necessarily need digging anymore. He's already really good at his job. Let's start to specialize him out in what he would already be doing anyway. If there's nothing to build, maybe he'll help with ranching, sure. We want him to be good at wearing suits, so that if he's building in other places that require suits, like out in space or in hot areas or something like that, he'll be really good at it too. We still want him to be good in this mechatronics engineering. Look how much extra morale we still have to play with. Their thresholds are about 30. You can see some of them getting up in the 30s with all the stuff that we have set up. So maybe the last two I'd want is like these tiding jobs, because they'll give me extra strength to carry stuff better. So look, something a little bit more like this. And you can kind of judge how to respec and how to scale this later in the game for yourself. But you definitely want to try to optimize this so you have the best dupes possible. And with a combination of morale increasers, food quality, any of that type of stuff, you should have dupes that are very highly specialized, very good at their jobs. As far as the job balance, I'm not going to show a final, like, recommended job balance. I think that's good for you guys to kind of feel it out for yourself based upon how your colony is running. But again, I would definitely recommend not many artists or zero, not many doctors, and you know how things change later in the game. If you don't need to have any farming going on, then don't have any farmers. You can just kind of feel that stuff out for yourself. So, I think that's generally what I have for this. That's generally what I have for which duplicants to pick, how to specialize them, how to label them, how to do any of that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much all I have for this tutorial. Please let me know down in the comments if you guys have any questions, have any problems that you spotted there, have any other things that you would recommend to new players. Also, if you have any requests for any future tutorials, please drop them down in the comments below as well. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll be back with more videos really soon. I appreciate it. Take care. Have a great new year. See you later.